Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Volkswagen emissions crisis that hit the news worldwide in 2015. This is a scandal that was discovered by the Environmental Protection Agency and was ultimately brought to life within that time period. With this being such a huge worldwide discussion, it is still talked about today, but very few people know exactly what happened. Today I'm going to be explaining exactly what emissions means, how Volkswagen messed up, and how it affects you as an everyday consumer and as an everyday person. Like I said, this was a huge scandal. It became political cartoons, it became skits, it became the discussion on the news every night. It was a big deal. With that being said, a lot of people don't know what emissions means. Fortune released an article in September of 2015 entitled Everything You Need to Know About Volkswagen's Emission Crisis, where they defined emissions as exactly what it sounds: the exhaust that comes out of the back of a car from an internal combustion engine. Now, this is what causes a lot of air pollution. It has been scientifically researched and studied that what comes out of our cars is causing a lot of our global warming and a lot of our pollution in the air. Now, in 1963, the Clean Air Act was initiated to help cut down on this air pollution. This was a worldwide effort, especially here in America, to cut down on this and to start saving our planet and really recognizing that we can do better. There are federal and state regulations put in place for the amount of emissions that your car can produce and put out into the air. Now, what Volkswagen did wrong is they put in every one of their diesel cars for a few years a defeat device. Now, this wasn't actually a device, it was more of a software that once the software recognized that it was being tested for emissions, it would flip on and it would produce better results. It would lie about what the emissions actually were on the car. This was obviously a big deal. They were all of a sudden violating the Clean Air Act and going against the environment's practices and harming the world around us. This goes on to explain the polluting compounds and how exactly it worked, and explaining exactly what the defeat device was in the cars. Now, this was something that Volkswagen did come out and admit to, and they explained that they had actually been doing it for a few years. This instantly hurt the company as a whole. So in 2015, the Environmental Protection Agency found that many Volkswagen cars being sold in America had this defeat device. They were defeating the emissions testing, so they were ultimately cheating the system. We then started to realize that this was affecting a lot of cars. There were 11 million cars worldwide that were now being affected by this device. And there were about 482,000 cars here in America alone that were recalled due to this. And we then start to realize this is affecting everyone. This is not something that just affected Volkswagen consumers because they owned a Volkswagen car, but it affected everybody in their everyday lives. If we start to think about how much emissions is produced from one Volkswagen car that was defeating the system, put that into perspective for the almost 500,000 cars here in America alone and the 11 million vehicles around the world. That ultimately leads to a ton of pollution that is slowly breaking down our environment, and we're going to be left with nothing. Obviously, this affected Volkswagen consumers immediately because then they were left with a car that they didn't know what they could do with. Volkswagen did come out with a program where you could trade back in your car and be able to go get another car, or you could have the device taken out, the system repaired, and be put under regular emissions testing and making sure that you pass without that device. We have everyone affected by this, and this is a huge deal. Ultimately, Volkswagen has suffered immensely from this. Their stocks have dropped. Their trust from consumers is very, very low, and there are a lot of people who said that they will not buy a Volkswagen again or will not repurchase or will not purchase in the first place. And that hurts a company extremely. There are a lot of companies who do not want to merge with Volkswagen, and they refuse to simply because of this scandal. Ultimately, we now understand that emissions is what's coming out of our car. It is what is filling the air. It is what's breaking down our environment every day. The Clean Air Act helped to try to bring those levels down and puts regulations and standards on our car to kind of defeat that and to kind of slow those efforts down. The Environmental Protection Agency did its great job by locking down on Volkswagen and figuring out exactly what was going wrong. Ultimately, this is going to result in a lot of things for the company itself, but they are still working to get all the cars out, and we are starting to learn exactly who is still being affected. Thank you guys so much, and I appreciate your time and effort today.